In my honest opinion, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 are tied for first place. Yeah,
You know,
the decision I took.
I've probably made quite a few mistakes here on this channel. While there's nothing wrong with that, this one, it stuck with me. I'd say it was one of the worst decisions I've taken, apart from... Let's not beat around the bush here. Saying that SA1 and SA2 were tied for number 1 in my ranking was a huge fake out, and it kinda makes me feel like I chickened out. But I can still fix that. Go back in time maybe, kill my past self, then act the exact same up to this point. No, I can't do this again. There has to be an easier way. Hey, how you going? As a very popular YouTuber, owner of one of the largest YouTube channels in fact, I was wondering if you could help me out here. You have any idea of how you could decide between two games you really like in a tiebreaker sort of way? What do you mean this is a dominoes? The Sonic Adventure titles. I've been meaning to talk about those in detail for a while now, because they're probably my favorite era of the franchise. To be completely honest, having both games be tied for first place on my big 3D Sonic review wasn't a greedy move to milk more content out of it. Oh, at least it wasn't originally that. I was genuinely struggling to decide at the time of writing, but eventually during the editing I just realized I had to pump out some sort of conclusion to the video or else I wouldn't post it in time, so I did make the conscious decision to leave this topic for a later moment. But fear no more, the moment is now. Which game do I prefer? Sonic Adventure 1 or Sonic Adventure 2? As you may be aware due to a number of factors, including but not limited to this whole ass fucking video, I'm a Sonic fan. Which means I'll be discussing these games in way more depth than what is necessary, as per the contract. Just to get this out of the way, both games have killer opening cinematics. I like both for different reasons, and I couldn't say one is better than the other. That's about where the similarities end after you boot them up. When you start your new game in Sonic Adventure 1, you're greeted with this.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
I think this is a good place to begin. As a young kid in either 1999 or 2001, this shit was cutting edge, but we all know that things change. These games aged, yes, but is it a big issue? It depends on your point of view, but I'll give you my 2 cents on the matter. Have these games aged badly? The short answer is probably. What? Like, yeah, if you're not willing to overlook the really janky early 3D animations and stilted voice acting, then you're not gonna be able to take the plot of these games that seriously. One glimpse at the first cutscene might be enough to get a chuckle out of you. Now, if you're a fan of these games already, you know that there's some good stuff underneath the rough exterior, but even then it's hard to take moments like this.
Watch out! You're gonna crash! Ah!
Or this.
You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you eat those words!
Seriously in any way. Now here's the point I want to make. None of that really matters. Well, at least not that much. Yes, it does have a big chance of hindering your enjoyment or sometimes even your understanding of the story, but that's where all the issues end. You're meant to play the games, and while they might have aged graphically in some cases, the gameplay is the most important part, and mostly I think that has aged like a fine wine rather than a carton of milk. More on that later though. Although if I were to compare the two games to see which one aged the worst, which is exactly what I'm doing, I'm gonna have to give this L to SA1. Yeah, it's a very predictable outcome seeing as this is the game that came before, and also the first real 3D Sonic title. Almost every cutscene is badly paced and the voice acting is off due to some wacky direction mistakes. Sonic Adventure 2 is a big step above the first in almost every way, graphically speaking, and the cutscenes are actually acted out and stuff instead of being pre-made animations with the in-game models. You know, I was talking about how when you start a new SA1 save, you're greeted with a pretty awkward cutscene. But in SA2, well, the animation isn't by any means perfect, like, no. The first cutscene is very well paced and good enough so that you can be invested in what's going on. Come on, that's just iconic. After jumping out of a gun helicopter with a makeshift snowboard and then doing a flip in midair just to show that Sonic has always had the exaggerated swagger of a hedgehog teen after all, you start the first level, City Escape. I think this is a good time to discuss the pacing of the story. As I've been leading on to previously, Sonic Adventure 2 is very well paced. The story might have its slower moments, but it never feels slow. There's a real sense of adrenaline as you move from story beat to story beat, and they all play into the main plot in some way. SA1 is not as fast by comparison, especially in the beginning, where you watch a drawn out cutscene, fight a really piss-easy boss, watch some more cutscenes, walk a bit, and then finally you can play the first level. The story does pick up after that, but it could have been handled better. It's not a complete night and day difference though, because while SA2 is fast, it does that by having the story be told in a completely linear way. You don't get to choose which character you play as and how the story happens, where the whole appeal of SA1's campaign is that you can play as different characters if you want a different spin on the game or the story. Yes, some campaigns are slower and some are faster, but you have the freedom to choose, which may be very appealing to some people. Personally, I think both have their ups and downs. SA1 is very open-ended and evokes a sense of freedom, with the slower story and the ability to choose what campaign you want to play, while SA2 keeps the momentum up and flows the story more organically at the cost of being able to relax and be free for a bit. I don't think either approach is objectively better because both games have different stories and they demand different things. SA2's story is fast, and it'd be kind of awkward if Sonic stopped to fuck around with the burger shop statue while the planet is doomed to be obliterated in 24 hours, while in SA1, fucking around is incentivized to solve small hub world puzzles and progress the narrative. If you fuck around, you will inevitably find out. And that's why I think both games are indeed well paced. Now, I keep talking about the narrative and how the pacing suits the narrative and all of that stuff, so why not touch on that in more detail then? Both games have great narratives. SA1 shows different perspectives on the same big narrative, while SA2 has many narratives that happen from a few fixed perspectives. SA2 would be the more traditional structure, where characters have different amounts of screen time and key moments that all happen in the same context. SA1 is more interesting, I will admit. You only see part of the story on your first playthrough, and with every playthrough you end up seeing a different piece of the puzzle fall into its place. It's all good, until you realize Sonic's story is the best one, and the other ones aren't really adding that much. Like, yeah, it's obviously good to know what happened to the other main characters, but I'd say only 3 out of the 6 storylines are crucial to know, that being Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles' perspectives. The other ones are nice to have, but they're just kinda there. Although I do like one thing that both games do, which is unlocking a final campaign once you beat all the normal ones, as an epilogue to the story, which is pretty cool. Well, then which story do I prefer? I mean, both tackle the theme of good versus evil, but one is a more shonen anime-esque plot of how the greed of evildoers can harm the balance and unleash man-made horrors beyond anyone's comprehension, while the other one, that being SA2, is more direct, with the opposing sides being light and dark, but when they all work together they realize they're just two sides of the same coin. Although, I have a thing for the high stakes and overall more direct approach of SA2's narrative. Another thing I really enjoy about Sonic Adventure 2 is the lore. Like, good lord, that game has some really good stuff. The plot actually handles some pretty messed up shit that you wouldn't realize was there unless you paid extra attention to all the details. I like both stories, and the way the narratives are presented as well, but I prefer a more direct, confident, and better executed story than a story that I can take at my own pace, at the cost of slowing down the pacing of the narrative. Personally, I'll give this one to SA2. And after seeing this much of the narrative, I can assume you've played a majority of the game by now. So, without further ado, let's tackle the most important part. The game, the music! Yeah, obviously, that's the best part, right? As is tradition with Sonic games, the soundtracks are always good, and both of the titles have phenomenal scores. I wouldn't even dare to choose between them because all of them are banging as hell. The character themes in both games are incredible at showing exactly what a character is like, through a really catchy song also. And while I do prefer the Sonic Adventure 2 iterations of some of these themes, like Sonic's theme, It Doesn't Matter.
It doesn't matter now what happens, I will never give up the fight. Long as the voice inside me says go, I will always keep on running. It doesn't matter who is wrong and who is right.
Both versions are great, and all character themes are incredible at showing what these guys are all about.
Well, I don't look back, I don't need to. Time won't wait.
Actual level themes are made with different philosophies in mind, but both approaches work for their respective games. In SA1, the environment dictates what the song will be, like scaling a lush, green, but sometimes windy valley. But then you get sucked in by a tornado and have to make a fucking mad dash to get out of there alive. And when you finally make it, you're greeted with the blue sky and freedom at last. And all you have to do is make your way down again. SA1 is littered with stuff like this, and it's great. SA2 on the other hand has compositions based on the characters themselves. What is happening currently in the level is seen through the musical lens of the character you're playing as. That ranges from trying to find the pieces of your precious Master Emerald that got lost in a spooky pumpkin hill.
I ain't gon' let it get to me, I'm just gon' creep down in Pumpkin Hill, I got to find my lost piece.
Fleeing from the prison of one of the biggest military bases while the military is out to get you, and the only way to evade them is beating them to a rocket that's about to launch so you can take it for a ride and get the hell out of there? I love both soundtracks and I think they're masterpieces. But it's not all just sunshine and rainbows. There's admittedly a bit of an issue with the sound. It has nothing to do with the music itself. It's just that in both games, especially SA2, the mixing is really not well done and the music is always louder than it needs to be. Also, the sound effects are loud and repetitive and the songs loop and repeat at the wrong times in a few scenes, which really breaks any immersion you could have. And yeah, that part isn't perfect. Sonic Adventure 2 takes the L on the sound design department, but, you know, it isn't by that much. The first game is littered with those issues as well. Soundtracks are still fire, though. Now for the real shit. By this point, we've already finished the game. Went through the entire learning process, got good, listened to the banging soundtrack, and maybe even paid attention to the story. You know, crazy, right? Having played through both games fully means that there's only one thing left for me to discuss. The gameplay. Which game plays better? Well, the short answer would be, they're both fun in different ways. It's once again a matter of preference, but that's fucking boring. Let's go for the long answer. Sonic Adventure 1 gives immense freedom to the player, and that extends to the gameplay as well. It's as open-ended as a Sonic game gets, and very smooth to control. While I still like SA2's whole campaign, which I'll be talking about in a bit, Sonic's story in SA1 is the best 3D Sonic has ever played. It might not be the best selection of levels, but none of them are bad. Okay, one of them is bad, but yeah, the level design is really great, and the levels have multiple different routes to the end goal. They almost feel like sandboxes in a way, and while there's still a linear get from point A to point B kind of deal, it's still freeform enough to feel a lot like the classic 2D titles that came before it. Sonic Adventure 2, on the other hand, is a lot more linear by comparison. The controls are generally a bit looser due to a slight change in speed, and the more open exploration segments were left to the other characters to even out the playing field, which leaves the Sonic levels to be quite a bit less open. Even with all of that, it's not easy to decide which one is better. And I don't mean that it's hard to decide which one of my children is my favorite, although it definitely feels like that. What I mean is, it's not all just black and white. There are a few sore spots around the games. As I said, SA2 is more linear and controls are a bit looser, but ultimately the selection of stages and the decision to build stages around the characters themselves made everything flow very nicely. SA1 gives you the freedom, but at the cost of many things, one of them being that I would never play Big Story out of my own volition, ever again. Yeah, I've talked about this before, but in my opinion, the only really great gameplay styles of SA1 are Sonic's platforming, Knuckles' treasure hunting, and Gamma's mech shooting. The other ones are forgettable at best and really fucking awful at worst. And while Sonic's campaign is the best one and has all of those things going for it, the other two I like haven't really reached their full potential yet. You know, SA1's campaigns feel like if someone handed a box with 6 chocolates to you, but only 3 of them are good, while the other 3 range from spoiled to actually fucking poisoned. And you have to eat all of them if you want to get another good one. SA2 is a much neater experience. The mech shooting and treasure hunting feel a lot better in many ways, and while I dislike the changes to the treasure hunting radar in SA2, I still think the levels themselves are better simply because they were built for Knuckles to explore. And that goes for all of the levels. When they're built around the characters, the level design can suit them a lot more. Sonic Adventure 1 has great Sonic levels. That may or may not play well for every other character in the game that shares these stages, while SA2 has levels built for each character alone and only that character. Even if from a pure gameplay standpoint, I think Sonic himself is more fun to control in SA1, it's really hard to ignore that the other 5/6 of the game are an enormous mixed bag. So that's why, from a gameplay perspective, I do prefer SA2. It's a more complete package overall, and it's a lot more balanced. The experience is a lot neater, and most of the small issues present before were patched up, all nice and tidy. Well, what's the verdict then? After examining both games and replaying them quite a few times to make sure, these are both pretty great Sonic titles. It's no wonder they were both on the absolute top of my huge fucking list, towering over 10 other titles. But which one is the absolute best? Which one will be top 2 so the other can prevail as my favorite 3D Sonic game of all time? Sonic Adventure 1 is a great game. It's filled with free-flowing stages and a fun little story to wrap everything up, but it hasn't aged nearly as well as its successor. While it may have more characters, and one of these characters is overall better to play than the other counterpart, the complete experience isn't very satisfying. A game with mostly bad cutscenes that even I, an absolutely fucking crazy devoted fan of the series, may find hard to overlook at times. And even if the story is really good, I think the overall gameplay prevails over that. Not only that, but I prefer SA2's narrative in general, especially with how it wasn't badly executed. There are a few plot holes, but I much prefer that to a story that is immediately dated by the early 3D cutscene work, and the not-so-stellar voice acting. So, as you may or may not have expected, my favorite 3D Sonic game of all time is Sonic Adventure 2. Although, you know, if Generations had an actual DLC pack, coupled with extra stages, maybe even if it had a good plot on top of all of that, then maybe I could...